Hello, my name is Chris Carr from Harrow and Turf. Today we're talking about lawn failures, the most common one in the summertime, heat stress. We're having a look at the turf farm. Don't worry, you're not going anywhere. We're having a look at some grubs. What is lawn turf? What to achieve? What the customer wants? Preparing the ground, what and when to order. The important bit here, this is not heat stress, but it looks like it. This is heat stress. When is it likely to happen? A quick quiz, and then how to repair the damaged lawns. And if we have time, how to lay turf video. This is the turf file from the air, and you will notice that production fields are not uniform. That is a fact of nature. But the turf will show variations in colour and texture, and that's because it adapts to the appearance to the soil beneath it. In other words, rest assured that once the grass has fully established in your garden, it will take on the soil characteristics which is laid on. So, for poor soil, it will result in a thin grass. Good, well-fertilized soil and care to mowing will result in a healthier lawn. These are the types of grasses that are found in turf. You have perennial ryegrass for wear, so when you have a very difficult hot summer, the chances are that ryegrass will still be there. Strong creeping red fescue for shady environments. 2-inch fescue for close mowing, and then smooth stalk meadowgrass, which is one of my favourite ones, that produces a rhizome, a bit like a strawberry plant, crawls along underneath the surface of the turf, pops its head up, makes another plant, gives the lawn an element of self-repair. Now all of these grasses are susceptible to heat stress. Some common grubs found in turf, well, the blue background one there, that is fever fly, march fly. Leather jackets you'll find in a lawn. Schaefer grubs, there's loads of Schaefer grubs in lawns. That's the one with the 20p piece on it. Now all of these serve a purpose, but too many of them can be a problem. So, what is lawn turf? Well, it's obviously got the soil on it. That's a rich grade 1 dark soil. Then it's got the hairy stuff, the greens grass, which has got different types of grasses in them. And then can you see the brown thatch? That's part of the plant. That's the sheath of the plant. It's meant to be there. And then of course the white secure net wrap for transport. What to achieve? From this to this. What the customer wants. So preparing the ground to receive the turf. It depends on site conditions. Make sure it is that you do go to the site and have a look at it before committing to the job. Remove all vegetation with a turf stripper or a turf nine, or you can cut the existing grass with the lawn mower as close to the deck as you can. Be careful of the stones, and then you can treat it with a systemic weed killer which will kill the roots. After that's taking time to kill the roots, you then can rotivate to around 6 inches deep, add or remove topsoil, rake level and remove stones, and then the gardener's shuffle. You'll see that on the video perhaps if you don't watch that. We do the boot press, rake level, and then apply a pre-turfing fertilizer. It's really important to give these new plants a chance and opportunity to get going in your environment. What and when to order? Ensure you order the turf after the area has been prepared. Order 5% more than you need to allow for trimming. There's nothing worse than not having quite enough turf and having to go back to the supplier and find that you've got a different batch. Pre-order the fertilizer. Order walking planks. You'll see that again in the video. It's key to have some walking planks. You don't want to mess up all that hard work that you've done in preparation only to put holes in by your hobnail boots. And an old wood saw to cut and trim the turf. And a hose pipe. It does need water. And then be prepared to work in the evening. Not everything is delivered in the morning. So we're talking about heat stress. Be prepared to work in the evening. So this is not heat stress, but it does look like it. In this example, it's simply not been laid in time. So I reckon there's no other turf like no other product like turf with a shelf life. Perhaps fish, I suppose. Being rolled up for too long, it prevents the air to get in and the light, which will disappoint the customer. So there we are. So the month is September. The image on the far right was unrolled 2 days after harvest. The middle roll was unrolled 4 days after harvest. And the one on the left hand side was 6 days after harvest. So that middle roll, the middle one, will still probably be alright. It's just not had the sun to it. But the one on the left hand side, can you see that those darker areas? That will not grow. This is heat stress, and it can occur very, very quickly. It's common in late spring and early summer. So, how do you find out what the early signs are of heat stress? Now, can you notice those grey colours? One there, another one there, grey, dark, black colours. That's heat stress. So I'd like you to study these photographs and see where heat stress has occurred on the left photo, and then compare it with the photo on the right. Such a shame that the guy there on the left photograph sitting down relaxing, and he's worked jolly hard to get his lawn done. He's had his son watering it for him, but sadly, because he didn't lay it on the day of delivery, although he knew he had to, he chose to ignore it, but because he didn't, that's what's happened to the turf. So we're going to look at this a little bit closer now. So looking again, where do you think the burnt out areas were positioned on the pallet of turf? So there's the pallet of turf. Whereabouts do you think the burnt out areas were positioned on the pallet of turf? Can you see that red line I've just drawn there? And another red line. You can see where some of those turfs are black on halfway through it and green on the other half. Colour that bit in just to make it a bit more prominent. So where the greener area is, that's where the turf has been outside part of the pallet. The blacker areas, the turf has been on the inside part of the pallet. It is crucial to split the pallets down if installation is delayed. Okay, so when is heat stress likely to happen? What to look out for? It's at risk during April and July, high humidity and thundery weather, fresh milk going off even when it's in the fridge, rapid grass and seed head growth, sticky grass clippings, water dripping from the inside of lorries, steam from the rolled up turf. Look out for that. If it's too hot to handle or if it's actually burned, you've got to call 01638 742 901 for advice. They'll be able to tell you what to do at the time. Take photos and video and send to complaints@harrowandturf.co.uk on the day it was delivered. Don't complain on the day after delivery. We don't know how long you may have had the turf. It's got to be done at the time. That's what's to look out for. How to reduce the risk. Advise customers when the turf is expected and lay it on the same day as delivery. Plan for evening work. Not all deliveries will be made in the morning. Prepare the ground before delivery. Place the turf pallets in the shade. Break down the pallets into smaller piles of turf. And if you're a retailer, lay the turf out and water. Water the ground before installation. Water the turf after installation. Keep watering in early morning and late at night. Do not ever cover up or water turf when it is on the pallet or stacked up. It will make it go off even quicker. One thing that does slow sod heating down is dry turf. Dry turf is good turf. Irrigation on the farm is a skilled operation, and having seen the effort the turf farmer and yourselves do, why would you not lay turf on the day it's delivered? Quick quiz. What do you think has caused the following issues? The Mypex might give it away. That's the black plastic underneath it. So what that is, it's where unsold turf has been laid out in a garden centre. It's a good thing, but they're not watering it. It's not so good. What do you reckon's caused that? Yep, heat stress. The turf has just been saved in this case. Ugh. What do you think? Poorly prepared soil on the left and poor watering. But what about that on the right? Using yesterday's turf for yesterday's job and being used on today's job is not good enough. In other words, turf was left over yesterday. Well, we'll put it onto today's job. Doesn't matter. That turf will be all right. Most of the time it will be. But at the time when heat stress is more prevalent, we know that contractors do this. You put turf onto the next day, it will suffer from it if it's in a heat stress period. What do you think is wrong with that? Watering, which is good. Okay. Not having enough time or labour to finish the job. So you'll see heat stress is on the left of the photo. That's when it was finished. What about this one? Bit of a trick one, this one. It's insufficient watering at a time when heat stress is not prevalent. So that's what happens to turf when it's not watered and when heat stress is not happening. This is another tricky one. You'll see that there's some grass in the foreground, drought, and then a strip of green grass, and then drought again. What do you think? Enough water, but there again, not enough water. Shade and sun reflection can also cause this. So in other words, in the foreground, the whole lawn is being watered. Smashing, great. But the foreground is in a shady environment where it's droughted out, where those gaps are between the turf. That's where the grass plant has not been able to take all the water up. It's suffered. It's probably suffered by sun reflection from the bricks of the house. And then you can see that sort of green strip that goes from the front door or perhaps a door to the drain. Grass will stay greener when it's laid on top of a drain, assuming there's soil between the two. And then you've got that sun reflection again beyond that. Bit of a trick one, but a very, very interesting one. So, repairing damaged lawns. Heat stress turf will not recover. It needs to be replaced for the whole affected turf. The whole lawn does not necessarily need replacing. The trouble is, if you don't fix it quick, it will be harder to do because it will start to grow into the garden, and then you'll then end up with different shades from different fields. Areas of poor lawns can be patched up by placing a new turf on top of the patch and cutting it in with a half moon lawn edger, and then cutting out the bad area with a turfing iron. A turfing iron is like a spade. If patching in an existing or an older lawn, the new patch and turf will look amazing, and you might end up doing the whole lawn. And gaps between turf can be caused by inadequate watering and can be fixed by watering and mixing seed with topsoil from the supplier who supplied the turf, and then filling in the gaps. If you are concerned at point of delivery on any issues, you must call 01638 742 901, who will advise on the course of action. Remember, do not leave it until the next day. Say it and send it to that number. There are loads to learn about existing lawns. What do you think has caused the following issues? What do you think? Drought, no water. Do you remember me saying about ryegrass? This was typical picture taken in the 2018 summer, which was a fantastic summer, but there was a lot of lawns ended up with just tufts of grass because they weren't watered or they weren't able to take the water up. The plant wasn't able to take the water up. That's what that is. Ooh. Bit of a tricky one again. massive grub population, or too much shade or too much sun. So grubs will munch their way across the lawn if the population is too high. And quite often the grubs will be in the soil supplied on site, because there's a lot of soil on site. But it could be a shade issue. There is some plants growing there. Or it could be too much sun. Without actually going to the site itself, it's difficult to exactly know what that is. This is an interesting one. What do you think has caused that? Grubs in the lawn being pecked out by birds. So the birds have done that. And it's interesting to see a bird. Have a look at nature. Have a look at the birds out on the lawn. And if ever you see their head to one side like this, that's because they're listening for the grubs underneath. It's clever as nature. What do you think's caused that? Spot on. You've seen it before. Leaving damp, sticky clippings on a lawn will make a hard cap, and it will stop the grass from growing underneath it. You'll end up with little bare areas. Okay, I did mention this earlier on when we were looking at the turf farm. Yep, no nourishment. Leaving grass long and cutting more than 2/3 off will thin out a lawn. So letting the grass grow tall, chopping it down and not feeding it, you'll end up with a lawn looking like that. Ooh. What do you reckon? Yep, Fusarium, in this case red thread, that's a mycelium, it's a fungi, quite typically seen on poor lawns or nitrogen poor lawns. This is very common. You'd see this typically in public parks. So you've got a greener area and then a not so green area. So why is the green area green and the rest of it isn't? Yep, nope. Animal urine. That will feed a lawn, resulting in a nice green area against the poorly fed areas. That's what's caused it. Animal urine is a form of fertilizer. So there are plenty of advice leaflets available from Harrod and Turf, and customer satisfaction is really crucial, particularly in a world of open source information. And we can support you with all that technical advice. Ensure you have access to it. The risk of poor advice or worst case scenario is not being paid or even legal action from your customer.
The key to creating a great lawn is preparing the ground really well and investing in a good quality turf. And we're happy to help calculate your requirements and organise your delivery for you. It's really important that turf is laid as soon as it's delivered, so it's as well to prepare the ground before ordering your turf. The first job is to take away any existing vegetation. Using a turf cutting machine from your local hire shop or a good quality garden spade, take off any old grass and weeds and make sure that roots are removed. If you have time, vegetation can be sprayed off using a systemic weed killer. Leave at least 3 weeks between spraying and preparing the soil for turfing. The next job is to get the ground ready for all those plant roots to settle into. First, remove any big stones or builder's rubble. If the topsoil on site is poor quality or there's not enough of it, it's a good idea to buy in some good quality topsoil. Rotivate or dig the soil to a depth of at least 15 centimetres. Then rake it over, aim to get a nice fine tilth and a level surface. This is called the gardener's shuffle, What he's doing is firming the soil so that the new lawn won't settle down into hills and hollows when it's used. After shuffling, give the soil another rake over and check the levels before starting to lay your turf. The last thing you want to do is mess up your nicely levelled soil, so always work from a turfing board. Always avoid having small pieces of turf at the edge of a lawn. They're very vulnerable to drying out. So first of all, lay turfs all around the edge of your lawn, using a turfing knife to trim them to size if you need to. If you don't have a straight edge, you can use your turfing boards as a guide. Next, start filling in the middle, working backwards to avoid stepping on the newly laid turf. Lay the turfs in a brickwork fashion, butting the edges up nice and tight together and using a turfing knife or a turfing iron to cut them to size. When the whole area is covered, give the grass a really good watering. To make sure enough water has been applied, lift up the corner of a turf and ensure the ground underneath is good and wet. You'll need to water every day until the turf has established. Remember though not to waste water. Use a watering can or a hose pipe, not a sprinkler, and water in the evening or the early morning to avoid evaporation. For help and advice, please visit our website or call our team.
So, there you have it. If you have any questions, talk amongst yourselves. No, seriously, if you have any questions, do email them to me. And thank you very much indeed for spending the time to watch this. And goodbye.